Well, at last we've come to that point of the day where we're going to say our fond farewell shortly. And I run through an aspect that we call facetiously the laying on of hands, just to give a feeling for what we're going to say, bearing in mind you have just completed your final command check. Something that I emphasize at the outset is not the final command check, because you need to have a thought process when you do your final command check that I've already arrived, because the training captain who puts you up for the final command check is required to have absolutely no doubt whatever in his mind that you will pass it. So to all intents and purposes, your command training, command course is complete, or has been completed by the guy who is going to say off you go for your command check. And it's currently done by a flight manager or a training standards captain. And if you're with me and you have done what I expect you to do, which is to pass, and I will invite you to sign the technical log for the first time as commander, shake you by the hand. Congratulations, Captain Bloggs. I'm delighted that you've got to this position. That was your last day on co-pilot's pay. And then we're going to, when all the kerfuffles die down, take time out for what used to be a very, very formal process, which is why we call it the laying on of hands. And is now done generally by the guy who's bestowed this command on you. That doesn't diminish the value of what is going to be said. Now, in the first instance, yes, it was the last day on co-pilot's pay, but in addition to that, you have become a commander under the Air Navigation Order for British Airways. British Airways has entrusted you forevermore now as a senior member, senior manager of its airline. And consequently you have huge, awesome responsibility, and indeed the authority that goes with it. Your company, for which you are chairman of the board, is insured for $850 million and it moves at 500 knots. And you have, under the law, sole responsibility for that company. And that means to say that there are a couple of things that you ought to think about. One is that nobody is going to sit there and criticize your standards. You will not generally get feedback unless you ask for it. And ask for it is something that I do on the arrival of every flight. Okay guys, is there anything that we should have done and did and shouldn't have done? Anything that we could have done better? Very, very rarely will you get genuine feedback, but if you ask for it on a routine basis, then over time we will create the culture where you will get feedback. And as is always the case in Don Rumsfeld's way, you don't know what you don't know. You've got an unknown unknown, and what you want to know or get to is a known unknown, so you can put it right. So if you're getting up people's noses, you created the environment where you get feedback, that's good, and work on it. But in terms of your flying and the operational standards, no, nobody's going to criticize you on that unless you A, ask for it, or B, you're having a route check, or C, you're having a simulator run. And so your overall goal in life should be to operate not only in accordance with British Airways operating standards procedure, but to the highest standard of excellence that you can achieve. And you should never ever be satisfied with what you've done times 7.5. Standards are something that are entirely in your hands. The next thing, of course, is that next time you go flying will be with a genuine co-pilot. Co-pilot comes in all shapes, all sizes and sexes, and the thing about them is that there is no guarantee whatever. They necessarily can give you the support you routinely gave your captains. Therefore, the most sensible thing to do is to assume the worst. Assume the lowest level of support, and then be able to relax or sit back gently as that individual shows that they are going to give you a huge amount of support, they are going to help you, and they're really switched on, because that's a nice position to be in. But if you assume the best, then you can get sorely let down. And on that vein, you ought to recognise that we're going to ask you to do an absolute minimum of 10 sectors before you give one away, and there's good reason for that. There really is good reason for that, because we want you to settle down in the role, this new role, of commander. As in everything in life, it has a downside, because you get out of practice very quickly with the non-handling aspects. So what I say to you is that when you are going to give away your first sector, it need not necessarily be the 11th. Most importantly is you choose your co-pilot and the day. So if you're going out of London with a new co-pilot that you haven't flown with before, you don't know, then maybe if it's the 11th sector, it wouldn't be more sensible to fly it out yourself and give him the 12th sector on the way back when you've ascertained what sort of guy or girl this is. Assume the worst, then relax, not the other way back. For the first few weeks in short haul or months in long haul, you are going to feel very new. And until such time as you don't look round for somebody else, when somebody says, will you sign this captain? Then you ought to recognise that you are very vulnerable. It's a new job, new task, and you're vulnerable. And during that period, I would thoroughly recommend that you think about carrying a little bit of extra fuel in your back pocket when you're going to an unfamiliar place, or where the weather's marginal, or for whatever other operational reason. Now, when you're not looking round for somebody else, when they say, will you sign this captain, when you've arrived, when you've settled down, then of course British Airways fuel policy applies absolutely. And the way I describe this is that I do not put fuel on an aeroplane unless I would put it on even if I was paying for it myself, or put another way, I would put it on by taking cargo off in order to carry it. It's so important because fuel's that expensive. But in the early stages, it just takes away an added pressure when you're vulnerable to have 15 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever is appropriate if you're going to an unfamiliar place or a place that's marginal for operational reasons. So, yeah, okay, we're going to spend the whole of our career as a captain applying British Airways fuel policy, absolutely, but in these early stages, by all means, take a little bit extra if it will help reduce your vulnerability. And in that same vein, in Highlands Division, I used to say to the guys, look, I've got more respect for you, the organisation has more respect for you. If you sit in Aberdeen and cancel a service whilst you're watching your colleagues going up to Sunborough because the weather conditions are too severe for you in Sunborough, than if you go up there and you break an aeroplane. Because again, early on you're vulnerable. Now of course in no time at all, when you have built up your confidence built on competence, then yes, I expect you to be able to take the aeroplane anywhere where the weather conditions allow. But in those early days, if you're on a 747 where the crosswind limit for landing is 36 knots and it's blowing 36 knots across, it may be more prudent to go somewhere else and wait for the weather conditions to improve, rather than risk breaking the aeroplane. Most importantly, damaging your confidence, Commander, which we agreed we were going to build up on incremental stages built on competence. So, yeah, there may be occasions, because that's what Murphy's Law says, that early on in your command you're faced with weather conditions that are particularly severe. And if they're particularly severe and you are feeling underconfident about it, well, go somewhere else or wait for the conditions to improve. It doesn't last very long, as I say, weeks in short haul, months in long haul, few months in long haul. And it's no longer an issue. But it is, if it is an issue, cancel out. Now, we talked about air safety and leadership, things like that, but there may be occasions when you get yourself into trouble. It may be that you get yourself into a difficult situation. And what I would like to share with you is what I always share with my new commands, is that for the most part, you have senior colleagues that have either been there themselves or know someone who's been there. In other words, please don't sit on your own stewing about a problem. By picking up the phone, and as far as I'm concerned, you can pick up the phone 24 hours a day, 365 days to me. And by sharing that problem, recognise it's a problem halved. We do not want you to be concerned about something that really, with perhaps a little bit more experience or a little bit more exposure, you would be able to put it in its proper perspective. And very often a conversation with a senior colleague, somebody who is able to provide you with some pointers or some helpful advice, or just be a sounding board, will make a difference. So please don't sit there and worry or be frightened about something that happens. Share it will help. British Airways has a fantastic track record of wheeling out a huge amount of help, provided the organisation knows that you need it. And whatever it is, whether it's operational, whether it's personal, whether it's anything to do with life, either in aviation or outside, if you share it with one of us, we'll be able to help you be pointed in the right direction to get the appropriate help. If it's operational help, it might be a training captain. If it's personal help, it might be British Airways Health Service or whatever. But help is there for the asking. It will be freely given, but none of us is clairvoyant. We don't know what will be going on in your head. You've got to take the first step. And that first step may be talking to a mate who perhaps has been doing the job, a few weeks or months longer than you have, but start the process. And if you do get yourself into trouble, please get one of us to support you. And support you we will. And the last point is, have fun. You will have made up your own mind that I believe this to be one of the most rewarding and fun jobs in the world. It's also one of the easiest jobs if you take into account the sorts of things that we have been talking about these last few hours. It's huge fun. Yeah, of course it's got its downsides. Sometimes it's bloody drudgery. Sometimes I've got to go flying when I'd rather be down the pub, or whatever. Or it's got in the way of a family special do, or a party I wanted to go to, or whatever else. But put in a package, you've got the best job in the world, and you are the boss. You are the boss. You will never ever fly with anybody other than a nice guy. And so to that end, have fun, and I really look forward to flying on your airplane as a passenger in the fullness of time. Good luck. Well, enjoying this together, it seems that it's appropriate to judge what we set out to do. And actually only you can judge that. And there's been no producer here, no sound man, no film crew. So this is very much an amateur production, and you've had to put up with aircraft flying overhead and me stumbling on various parts of the conversation that I've had, and perhaps even picking up one or two mistakes. This has taken nearly a month to do. I'm not going to go back and redo this, although I hope that if it is a success, British Airways will decide to do it professionally so that it is of perhaps greater use and a more watchable presentation. But we had a contract, you and I. We said this was between you and I, and therefore, having got to the end, we need to analyse whether or not it has been successful. We said that success criteria depended on you taking away something either that you didn't know, that you refreshed, or perhaps you were able to think about some aspect of your operation that was in a different way that would serve you in some way in your command. And only you can determine whether or not that was the case, whether we have been successful, whether it has been worth switching me on for these many hours that you've had to spend. Because this has been a one-way conversation, if you should like to give me feedback, then I would be delighted to have it. And should we get the opportunity to do this again, then of course I will incorporate that feedback into anything we do in the future. But that said, I'd like to wrap up the whole of what we have done into what you might do in the time remaining to you as a co-pilot, so that your command is that proverbial walk in the park, which is what I believe it should be. We have shared together a number of sayings that I have said over the past quarter of a century in training, time and time again. I don't know whether they're original or whether I borrowed them. But things like being selfish with time and space, Commander. Selfish with time and space. Fly the aircraft, make it safe, keep it safe, do what's best for BA. That knowledge, technical knowledge, operational awareness knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Lack of it, therefore, is weakness. That time spent on diagnosis is never wasted. time spent on diagnosis is never wasted. We said that good leaders are followed. Good leaders are followed. Bad leaders are obeyed, perhaps. Bad leaders are obeyed. And we said that crew resource management is not about being nice to people. It's about being effective. It's about being effective. And that whinging fixes nothing. It just makes the perception of the problem worse. We said, and I gave you an example, that you can't pre-plan emergencies. What we do in the simulator is not pre-planning an emergency, it is training us to deal with the unexpected. And if we deal with the unexpected in a disciplined way, then funnily enough, chances are it will turn out good. If we deal with the problem in an indisciplined way, chances are it'll get worse or turn out bad. What I've tried to get across is the importance of having strategies that make time and space, strategies that will enable you to imagine places in the flight profile, that will enable you to be alerted to the fact that things are going adrift, but at a time when you can get them back into shape. The aeroplane is operated in accordance to your will, Commander. Co-pilots are chameleons, they'll do anything that you want within reason. So if you determine the professional approach, the striving for excellence, and create the strategies that will enable those things to happen, then they will. Then they will. Those strategies will have subroutines that over time become habit. And you don't have to wait to be a commander to make those subroutines, to put in place the sorts of things that you will do almost without thinking. The sorts of things that I have given you an example of, that you will routinely look at what your alternate can offer you in terms of category of arrival, approach category. You will take into account those sorts of aspects of your route that will enable you to answer the question, whether it be asked or you need to ask it yourself: is it possible to get into Kinshasa at this time of night? Because over time you've looked it up. You have taken the what if problem to its end conclusion. You've sat there one day coming out to the east of Gander and you have imagined yourself with a medical emergency, and you have been told by Medlink to take it to St John's. Well, whilst you're sitting there in your air-conditioned comfort, get out the plate for St John's, see that one end of it has a localizer backbeam approach. Work through what it is that you would do to achieve that localizer backbeam approach. Get on the ground mentally. Think through, what do I need to do now? Well, I need to get a new load sheet, I need to get some fuel. Have you ever fueled an aeroplane? If not, next time you've got the space and time, go up with the refueler, see how he does it. You only do it once, and then it's stuck away in the memory banks as a subroutine, as something that you can pick up should you need to. And all of those things make it possible for you to be swimming upstream like the swan because you're paddling like hell underwater. And that serenity gives your flight deck operation a professionalism and a level of relaxed approach, which is a pleasure to fly in. You need to know your stress indicators, because it's very important to work through what they are, to have a little mirror here that will enable you to recognize that you're getting stressed. You can get stressed in any seat and in any circumstance, but know what they are so that you can respond to them. I shared with you mine. Missing an RT equals 1 level. Snapping is level 2, and that's approaching danger. Do one or other of those, and I am into an immediate subroutine that says make time and space if I can. Unwind the stress, because as soon as you get stressed, your ability to monitor, your ability to think clearly outside the box is diminished. And that's because we're human beings, because this is a single processor, even for women. One thing at a time. And if that thing is taking up all of your capacity, then you will find yourself suckered in, like so many of our colleagues have been, into a high-speed, high-energy approach, which you later regret doing. We've said that we live our lives at 500 knots. I can't change things, wish I could, that have gone on before. I can only change the future. So if I have done something in an aeroplane and it's behind me, well, let's forget it. Let's try and concentrate on the rest of it in order to maximise or make the best out of the rest of the operation that's available to me. So, living life today, you've got to be a politician to change history. We're airline pilots, and we're only dealing with the here and now and the future. The here and now will affect the future, so let's make the here and now as best as we possibly can. We said if it's airworthy, we're going to fly it. If it's not, we won't. And that requires a degree of clear thinking on your part, Commander. Now, what I hope is that you've understood that I don't believe that the command is about driving the aeroplane. Yes, you've got to drive the aeroplane. There's a 747 or there's a 777. You should be able to operate the aeroplane, fly the aeroplane in a way in which you look forward to doing a Carnazi approach. Because it's fun. And because it's difficult. Because you know you can. And if you need practice in the operation, if you don't really understand the mode selects on a go-around and so on and so forth, well, fix it. Go in the simulator, fix it. There's always a need for stand-ins and you get paid for it. But command isn't about that bit. Not really. It's about managing the operation. Managing the operation. And the way in which you set about the task of growing from co-pilot to captain does not require you to do the command course. I believe that every co-pilot should be thinking about their command from the day they join British Airways. They should be yearning for command and thinking about it in a way in which they basically is self-help. Because there's nothing I'd like better than to say, here you are, here's all I know, here's my experience, here are all the mistakes I've made, off you go, start from here. But it can't do it. I can't learn stuff for you. You've got to learn it yourself. I can't experience stuff for you. You've got to experience it yourself. But those of you that are bright enough to use other people's experience, to use your observation skills in order to recognise what is good and what is less good, what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and build that into your day-to-day operation, will find that you are growing as a manager and therefore growing in command. And you don't have to be doing your sector. You don't have to have a piker sector. You just have a mindset that says every time you're going flying, you're going to make the decisions as though you were the commander, even if you've got to keep them to yourself. I hadn't long been second in command of an aeroplane when I was sitting alongside a captain, and in those days you did all the sector yourself. And it was his sector, and we made a major screw up. He made a major screw up, such that we were really embarrassed. When we got on the ground and it was all over, he turned to me and he said, "Well, Colin." "Yes, sir." Very formal in those days. That was my error." "Yes, sir." Feeling better. "However," he said, "be under absolutely no mistake, that was your fault." Oh, Christ. Oh, bastard. He'd screwed up and he was blaming me. And it wasn't until I thought about it subsequently that I realised what he was saying. He screwed up because his second in command, me, let him. I wasn't there for him. I didn't provide the support which he rightfully should have expected from me. And that was crossing the Rubicon for me, because I was determined from that day forth never ever to let my captains down. And although I didn't have any experience, so I couldn't use experience, I could use knowledge. I was determined. There was nothing in the operations manual that I wouldn't be able to regurgitate. No. There's nothing in the flying manual I didn't know. In flying coordinates I didn't know. And that set a mindset, which meant that every time I went flying, every time I thought about flying, I was endeavouring to learn. I was endeavouring to learn information that I could subsequently rely upon and use. I can't do it for you, you've got to do it yourself. You have to make that mindset. And if you do, knowledge is power. Your command course will walk in the park. And if you don't, then your command course will be touch and go. Knowledge is power. Well, thank you for staying with me these hours if you've reached the end. And I feel that if it has been of use to you, then it was worthwhile for me to have done it. And it's been a little bit of fun. Thanks.